The UP has always been a place where the water runs deep. Deeper than the mines, deeper than the forests, deeper than the stories we tell about the place. But depth doesn't always mean safety. Sometimes the danger sits quiet, waiting for someone to mistake size for strength, volume for resilience, and abundance for infinity. And right now, there's a new industry circling the Upper Peninsula that depends on people believing exactly that. That because we sit beside the largest freshwater system on Earth, we can afford to give it away. That our grid can stretch farther, that our quiet can absorb more noise, that our communities can carry the weight of an industry that barely employs anyone once the concrete dries. Tonight we're going to look at what happens when that assumption meets reality, when industrial cooling towers meet municipal water systems, when hyperscale power demand meets rural transmission lines, when promises meet the people who have already lived through this in Michigan, Iowa, Ohio, Arizona, Virginia, and beyond. This is Delta Deep Dive. Now let's dive into an industry that wants our depth, but drains our resources. Delta County pressed pause. A moratorium isn't indecision, it's awareness. It's a community recognizing that once certain industrial footprints are poured into the ground, they don't come back out. And that pause gives the entire Upper Peninsula a chance to look outward, to study what's already happened in other rural regions, and to ask whether the UP is built for an industry that consumes enormous resources while offering very little in return. Across Michigan, across the Midwest, across rural America, residents have already lived through the arrival of data centers. Their experiences aren't abstract, they're warnings. In Holland, when Meta explored building a massive data campus, the public learned that peak cooling could require more than 1 million gallons of water per day. That number came straight from the Holland Board of Public Works. At a public meeting, one resident stood up and said, "We already have summers where the system strains. If a data center needs that much water, where does that leave us?" Another resident added, "We're being asked to give up our water for a company that won't even hire our kids." In Grand Rapids Township, people living near the Switch data center described the noise. Not loud, just constant. Mechanical hum that never stops. Cooling towers, compressors, backup generators. One homeowner told Wood TV, "It's like a jet engine that never takes off. You hear it in your house, even with the windows closed." Another said, "We were told it would be quiet. It's not quiet. It's every hour of every day." Sheboygan County faced the reality of electrical strain. Rural grids aren't built for industrial-scale computing. A resident there told the county board, "Our grid goes down in storms already. How is it supposed to handle a facility that uses more power than the whole town?" And the county's own utility representatives admitted that the new substations and transmission lines would require permanent industrial infrastructure that would reshape the landscape. Outside of Michigan, the pattern repeats. In Altoona, Iowa, where Meta built a massive data center, a resident told the Des Moines Register they promised jobs. After construction, there were maybe 40. Most of them weren't even local. In New Albany, Ohio, where multiple data centers cluster near residential neighborhoods, one resident told city council, "We lost trees, we gained noise, and the jobs went to people from out of state." Another added, "The tax breaks were huge. The benefits to the community were small." In Mesa, Arizona, where Google built a large facility, residents complained about water usage during drought conditions. One said, "We're told to conserve water. They're told to expand." And in Prince William County, Virginia, where data centers have exploded across rural land, a resident testified, "The noise is constant. The lights are constant. The power demand is constant. The jobs are not." And then came the environmental complaints, the ones nobody expects until they see the water change. The stream used to run clear enough to see trout. Now it turns milky white every time the data center flushes its cooling system. We were told the discharge was harmless. It didn't look harmless. It looked like someone poured chalk into the water. The creek was pristine for decades. After the data center came, the water changed color. Nobody could tell us why. It's not just the color. It's the smell. It's the film on the rocks. It's the way the water doesn't look alive anymore. But the most alarming stories don't come from the surface water at all. They come from underground, from wells, aquifers, and ponds that began losing volume the moment industrial water draw began. Across rural America, residents have reported wells dropping, wells failing, and water tables shifting in ways that they had never seen before. In central Iowa, one homeowner said, "Our well went dry for the first time in 22 years. The only thing that changed was the data center coming online." Another added, "We had to deepen our well because the water table dropped. Nobody warned us that a data center could pull that much water." In parts of Ohio, where multiple data centers cluster near neighborhoods, farmers reported sudden drops in groundwater. The pond behind our barn lost almost a foot of water in one season. It's never done that before. We were told it was natural variation. It wasn't. A resident in Arizona described the same pattern. "We watched our pond shrink month after month. The data center kept expanding. Our water kept disappearing." In Virginia, where data centers have grown faster than the infrastructure meant to support them, one rural homeowner testified, "We had to truck in water because our well couldn't keep up anymore. We've lived here 40 years. It never happened until the data centers arrived." Another said, "The water table dropped so fast, the county didn't know how to measure it. They told us to monitor the situation. Meanwhile, we had no water." And in multiple states, residents reported the same chilling detail. The data center said their water use wouldn't affect anyone, but our well failed within months. These aren't isolated incidents. They're a pattern, one that emerges wherever industrial cooling demands collide with rural groundwater systems. Wells don't run dry because the Great Lakes are small. They run dry because local aquifers are small, because municipal systems are small, because rural water tables are fragile, and because industrial water draw doesn't care who else needs the same supply. A data center doesn't pull water from a limitless lake. It pulls from the same groundwater, the same municipal system, the same aquifers that families, farms, and fire departments rely on. And when those systems hit their limit, the consequences show up first in the places least able to absorb them. Private wells, small ponds, shallow aquifers, rural water tables. Hydrologists warn that rural aquifers behave like slow-moving savings accounts. They recharge gradually, seasonally, and unevenly. They are not designed for sudden industrial-scale withdrawals. One hydrologist in Ohio explained, "A data center can draw more water in a day than a rural aquifer can recharge in a week." Another in Arizona said, "When you overpump an aquifer, it doesn't bounce back. It collapses." Collapsed aquifers don't just lose water, they lose structure. The ground compacts, the water holding capacity disappears, the aquifer becomes permanently smaller. This is not theoretical. It has already happened in parts of California, Arizona, and Texas, regions where industrial draw exceeded natural recharge. Now imagine that dynamic in the UP, where aquifers are smaller, shallower, and more sensitive to seasonal variation. And that brings us to the argument people keep repeating. The UP has the Great Lakes. Doesn't that mean unlimited water? Sounds logical. It's wrong. The Great Lakes aren't a faucet. They're a watershed. The systems that deliver water to homes, businesses, and municipalities in the UP are not the Great Lakes themselves. They're small, local, human-built systems with limits, bottlenecks, and stress points. The UP's water infrastructure is small because the population is small. The UP's treatment plants are small because the demand is small. The UP's distribution systems are small because they were never meant to support industrial-scale consumption. The data center doesn't draw water from Lake Michigan. It would draw water from the municipal system, the same system that fills your tap, your shower, your fire hydrants, your schools, your restaurants, your farms. When a data center pulls millions of gallons during peak cooling, it doesn't matter how big Lake Michigan is. What matters is how big the pipes are, how much the treatment plant can process, how much pressure the system can maintain, and how much reserve capacity exists for emergencies. Escanaba already knows what happens when a community's water system hits its limit. We've lived through moments where demand outpaced capacity, where the system couldn't keep up, where the infrastructure simply wasn't built for sudden, high-volume strain. And when that happens, it doesn't matter that Lake Michigan is right there. The water can't reach the people who need it. The Great Lakes doesn't save you when the infrastructure between you and the water isn't built for industrial demand. Now imagine the electrical load. The UP's grid is stretched across long distances. Substations serve entire towns. Transmission lines run through forests and rural corridors. A hyperscale data center doesn't adapt to that reality, but expects the region to adapt to it. Communities across the country have already seen what happens when a data center demands more power than the surrounding area can supply. The grid strains, outages increase, new industrial infrastructure is built, permanent, expensive, and often paid for by the taxpayers. Then there's employment. Industry averages show that a billion-dollar data center employs between 35 and 50 people once operational. Most of those positions require specialized training. Communities across the country report the same thing. The jobs don't stay local. Michigan tax structure adds another layer. Data centers receive full sales and use tax exemptions on equipment, servers, cooling systems, electrical hardware. Everything that makes the facility profitable is exempt. Meanwhile, the community still pays for the road expansions, utility upgrades, and emergency service increases. Kent County officials learned this firsthand. They found themselves covering infrastructure costs that the data center required but didn't fund. And then come the consequences nobody expects until they arrive: collapsing property values and skyrocketing utility costs. Residents living near data centers in Ohio reported that their home values dropped because buyers didn't want to live next to industrial noise, industrial lighting, or industrial water draw. One homeowner said, "We tried to sell. People walked away the moment they heard about the data center." Another said, "The realtor told us to expect a lower appraisal because of the noise and the substation." In Virginia, families learned that once a data center arrives, the neighborhood's character changes. We lost the quiet. We lost the dark skies. We lost the rural feel, and our property value went with it. In Arizona, a resident said the data center didn't change just the landscape, it changed the value of everything around it. And then there are the utility bills. Across multiple states, residents reported sudden spikes in electricity costs after data centers came online. Not because the data center used their electricity directly, but because utilities raised rates to pay for new substations, new transmission lines, new transformers, and new industrial infrastructure. One resident in Iowa said, "Our bill went up 30% in 1 year. They told us it was because of infrastructure upgrades. Those upgrades were for the data center." Another in Ohio said, "We're paying for their power needs. They get tax breaks. We get higher bills." And in Virginia, the data center doesn't pay for the grid expansion. We do. Water bills rise too. Treatment plants expand. Pumping systems upgrade. Municipalities borrow money. Ratepayers cover the debt. A resident in Arizona said, "Our water bill doubled." They said it was because the system needed upgrades. Those upgrades were for the data center. And in multiple states, residents learned the same hard truth. The data center gets incentives. We get the costs. Residents in other states have already said what they wish they'd known earlier. Once it's built, you can't undo it. The jobs never came. The noise never stopped. The water use was way more than we were told. The tax breaks were huge, the benefits were tiny. Our bills went up, our property values went down. We paid for their infrastructure. Delta County's moratorium is a signal to the entire UP. Take the time to understand the full picture before making decisions that can't be reversed. The Upper Peninsula has always been defined by stewardship of land, of water, of community. Those values don't align with an industry that consumes enormous resources while offering minimal long-term employment. Communities across Michigan and across the country have already lived this story. Their experiences are warnings, and the UP has the advantage of hearing those warnings before the concrete is poured. And tonight, we're listening to the people who've already lived the data centers, because their voices may be the most important evidence we have. That was Delta Deep Dive, and that was the danger of data centers.